Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
We've just had a very long conversation on unrelated topics to this conversation that we're going to have. And so that means that our conversation today probably is going to be a bit shorter. But before I say anything, I want to just say that if someone is wondering about my finger, that's probably going to pop up on the screen, not scream. I chopped up the top of my finger, so that's in case someone is wondering, and I'm absolutely fine. But it explains why I have greasy hair and look like a general mess. So now that we've done the disclaimer about these things, Sarah and I were thinking that it's Thanksgiving in America. I always remember that I was kind of envious of Thanksgiving because I just saw pictures of these like beautiful tables and beautiful decorations, and I was like, why don't we have that? And just that idea of just having a day to be grateful for things and talk about it is great. So I came up with an idea. Why don't we sort of talk about the things that we are most kind of thankful for when it comes to this journey of awakening that we've both been on for a very long time, a journey that continues very much so. And so maybe the things that we have been grateful for so far in this journey. Sarah, do you wanna start? Happy Thanksgiving, everyone who's celebrating anyway.
Yeah, it's funny because my first response to your idea was I I thought about this movie called Love Actually that is like a little rom-com, I think from the early 2000s or something like that, with Hugh Grant. And I was like, oh, didn't they say like in the holidays, like the holidays, I think it's Christmas, is the time to tell the truth. It's not Thanksgiving, but it's the first thing that came to my head because I was thinking like that is kind of one of the biggest things that I am grateful for is that this awakening process has brought just so much more truth into my life, like telling the truth, like being with the truth, like, and that is not an easy thing. It's in so many ways like made life, it's just more real, right? Like there's just more of the reckoning with the reality of things, which doesn't alleviate like the difficult things in life at all. It just makes them more real. It makes me feel more real. It makes my relationships feel more real, conversations. There's just more transparency and like directness and like just Maggie and my conversation before we hopped on, and we were just chatting about this. Like, I guess I can't imagine having a conversation with such clarity and realness and honesty with each other, years ago. Like to
Mm-hmm.
be able to do that with someone. And the sort of just feeling you're in a conversation with someone and there's nothing between you two that you're like holding back or that there's like a
Mm-hmm.
weirdness or something where you're actually able to confront the things that you want to say to someone that like is on your heart, like those moments that I've had over the last week, 2 weeks, months with people where I'm able to just tell the truth and I'm able to receive the truth. That is like such a gift, even though it's not always easy. It's such a gift to know that like my life and what I'm living is as truthful as at least I can, as I know it to be, right? Like we talked about, you'd only know what you know when you know it. So there's always things that were like coming up to the surface for us to know. But as much as I know now, like I feel like I'm really leaning into like telling the truth and receiving the truth, trying to see things as truthfully as they are. And there's a way in which that clears a lot of the noise, you know, of what would have been there before of like the what ifs or the, you know, the,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
ruminations, the things about like there's a lot more clarity in being able to be so um yeah, being able to hold that more. Um, but of course there's like yeah, like there's just always cycles and seasons for all sorts of things coming up that reveal more of the truth that we didn't know was there. So yeah.
I mean, I must say that just the conversation that we had before we came on to me is such an amazing kind of real life metaphor, actually, for what Sarah just talked about and for what we're exploring on this channel, actually, and in all our conversations, because it's not about the absence of difficult moments. It's not about the absence of challenging situations and uncomfortable situations, at least the way, at least the way we see it. It's really just the willingness to be with that discomfort that I think is something that's been like the one of the biggest changes, where honestly, not that long ago, the conversation that we had before we came on, which by the way, just for anyone just to know, it was about certain things that were difficult for both of us, or let's say challenging, right? And so I know for the fact that like before the awakening or liberation or whatever you want to call it, I would probably run to the woods, like rather than have this conversation. Honestly, I would be very afraid of it. I would avoid it at all cost. Things would have been left unspoken, which probably would have lingered sort of in a background and, that sort of thing. So, um, the reason I say that to me is like a metaphor for awakening, because to me, the awakening is that open space that's undefended, fundamentally undefended, that allows for these difficult aspects of our humanness to sort of be brought in the middle and looked at, also with openness and curiosity, and also with that awareness that there's always this room, like wanting to see reality for what it is, just wanting to see the situation for what it is, as opposed to like looking at it through all sorts of our projections, which are inevitable. But it's willingness to see those projections as well. So you're literally open to asking someone, like, are you seeing this that way? Or like, what am I projecting here? Or am I projecting something? You know, there is this almost like a question mark in those explorations that's like there, that leads to all sorts of like insights and illuminations and clarity, because there is this openness. And like Sarah said, this can be really uncomfortable, especially if we're like not used to this kind of honesty and this kind of openness. But it really is possible, and I'm sure that this part is talking about no end point. I'm sure that there's like the bandwidth that gets stretched and stretched and stretched on this journey, where this becomes like easier and easier, because like I said, it can take time to get used to leaning into that discomfort and not avoiding these conversations. So I'm putting that on the list too, like the ability to explore with openness, without judgment, without necessarily getting into any like conclusions, just and with compassion as well, with understanding, as much as possible. I definitely owe it to the journey of awakening. So so that's definitely on the list for both of us. Do you have number two? I'm not sure
I
whether
was
I have
gonna
one
say,
yet.
yeah, that one that kind of leads to like a something that comes out of that. Like I love the way that you phrase that as like an open space that's undefended. That's such
Hmm.
beautiful way of phrasing it. Um, and there may be still like little bits of defenses that come up or like projections, like you're saying. That's part of actually the field of the things that
Mm-hmm.
are arising in that open space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there's a general sense that the wall is down, the wall
Mm-hmm.
that's blocking everything. Um, but yeah, I love that, there's something about being in that undefended space and then being able to be in conversation in that way
Mm-hmm.
that you find yourself surprising yourself and being surprised by others. Because part of the defenses of, our own reactions or triggers or the things that like where we hold people at bay, where like someone's trying to reach toward us and we reach away or we recoil,
Mm-hmm.
or the ways that like we run away to the woods or escape the hard conversations, or we
Mm-hmm.
escape the difficulty of the conversation with ourselves, like the ability to sit with ourselves and ask ourselves the difficult questions like why did I do this, or what
Yeah.
is it that's going on in me, or what am I actually feeling. um I think maybe part of it, like we've escaped that, or we choose to escape that because of the unknown, or the assumption that that's going to be really bad. That whatever's going to happen on the other side of me staying in this conversation is going to be really bad, or staying with myself is going to be too much to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all like founded on some really good history, really like I think about like for both of us, growing up,
Mm-hmm.
that's founded on some very good history of like being in many conversations where this would not have gone well. You know,
Yes.
like we're bringing up difficult things that we're going through would not have landed with the other person. And the space would not have been held undefended. Actually, the opposite, right? Where like the
Yeah.
person that you maybe relied on the most, or the people in your life that you wanted to love the most, were very defended. And for many of us in our lives, maybe we still have folks in our lives that are very defended. And so there isn't that, like in the embodied sense, like an ability to have those kinds of conversations. Um, so there is the reality of that, right? Where like
Mm-hmm.
just because you may have the desire to be more open and be more vulnerable or put your walls down, with some folks, it still makes sense maybe to not do that. There's
Mm-hmm.
some people
Mm-hmm.
in our lives that just aren't in that place. They're not going to be able to have a vulnerable conversation because their defenses go up too quickly. And it's not just not very practical. It's part of the leaning into the reality of things, leaning
Mm-hmm.
into the reality of like that's just not going to work with some folks. And there's also the beauty of the surprise of when things go differently, like because it's like, okay, now I am an open space, that these things can arise, and maybe I can hold this open space with someone else, and we'll be surprised at where this conversation takes us. Which I think just happened to me and Maggie, where we're like, oh wow. Like it kind of ended the conversation with us both being like, oh, that's so funny. Like that's just like,
And literally a surprise for both of us. We both
yeah.
got a surprise element to this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And like such a light, beautiful surprise at the end. And being
Mm-hmm.
like, how like of talking through difficult things and then coming to such a like having the openness enough to like have something arise, a
Mm-hmm.
new insight, a new thing, um, to be surprised by life or be surprised by other people. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so beautiful to like to be able to have that in life. Because after being for many years like things being kind of predictable, it's not almost like the worst thing, right? When you're like the world's predictable and things always go this way, and like
Mm-hmm.
if I do this, it'll always go bad or whatever. Like it's like then we feel trapped by life. We feel like our patterns trap us, like we're trapped in the same cycles or things like that. So I feel like that is something when you are able to shift into this, maybe it's different this time, or maybe I can be different this time. Maybe just by sitting with my emotions for 10 minutes, something will shift, and it will actually, just by like the sheer just ability to sit with something a little bit to your own
Mm-hmm.
sense of your own safety and tolerance, like it will shift. Like things will shift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a lot of the journey, I think, for me was like allowing things to shift, allowing things to be different or
Mm-hmm.
to change,
Yeah.
ways that
Yeah.
I didn't know were possible.
Yeah, definitely. And what I also love is like when we talked about that undefendedness, that undefendedness is sort of fundamental in that it includes the feeling of defense.
Yes.
Like if there is a bit of like breaks on and like, but you're aware of it, so you bring it
Mhm.
to that openness, you bring everything that's like real for you in that moment, basically, to explore. And I think for me, number two, although it is related, is really just recognizing the something that I actually forgot, but is not to be underestimated, like the weight of our projections, assumptions, speculations, and how much I used to live in that. So for example, I would assume I can't have a conversation with that person, which means I would never even approach the conversation or that person because I already assumed that it's not gonna go well, right? Or that it's gonna go a certain way, and then it becomes a kind of a fulfilling prophecy, possibly, if that happens. So just seeing just the workings of these projections, which I think with time become more and more subtle. Because, like Sarah and I were talking about the vastness of the unconscious, like how some of the projections we may not even be aware that might be still playing out. But again, it's not about freedom from projection, it's just recognizing when those projections are happening. That to me is like an openness to that. So to me, this has been the like I said, the willingness to see people and situations for what they are, as opposed to through my projections or through my wanting them to be a certain way and so on, which just, I think, I felt like a lot of people, because of that shift, became unburdened from my expectations of them, in a way that was not helpful at all to like our dynamics, because I was never really seeing those people as they are. I was constantly looking at them through lenses of what I want them to be.
Mhm.
And for me, that shift's been freeing for me, and honestly freeing for them, because I think that people detect that. Like sometimes some people energetically, there's like an energy of like constant expectation hanging on them from me. And so they feel like disappointment also all the time because they don't live up to my expectations. So like I don't know if I conveyed it the way I wanted it to convey, but this has been incredibly beneficial in terms of like relationships and my willingness to see people for what they are is what I'm trying to say, and rather than through my own stories and projections about them. So
Yeah,
that's my number two. I don't know if that connects to anything on your list.
it does actually. Yeah, it brings up for me like the letting go of expectations,
Mm-hmm.
especially around like the timing of people needing to be a certain way at any particular time.
Oh
And you're
wow, that's huge. That sounds like the
yeah,
little thing, but boy, that's huge.
it's so huge. And in order for that to happen, what the word that came up for me is just trust. Like there is a certain underlying trust that, at least for me, it felt like over my like journey, it's like leaning deeper and deeper and deeper into a trust that actually I can, what's coming up for me now is it is really based in feeling that fundamental okayness,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you start to build this relationship to, and then there's a shift where you feel like underneath it all, like it's gonna be okay. It is okay. It's always okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with that sense of like a trust, anyone can be whoever they need to be whenever they need to be it. Doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean it's not
Of course. Yeah.
difficult when like yeah, when you have difficult situations with people in your life that you're like, I love this person so much, or I care so much about this person, and I really wish this isn't how it was going to be or how things are, and you wish you could fast forward or change things or like make a different timeline out of how everything's
Mm-hmm.
unfolding. And that's just the reality of being a human and having a heart and like feeling things and the reality of our attachments and our relationships and how we do project things onto each other and we
Mm-hmm.
that we want to care for each other, we want to love each other, we want to be in a space of okayness together. But when there's like when someone's going through something or you're going through something together in a relationship, there's like different things where then, with that fundamental okayness and that trust underneath, for me, it has allowed me to, it feels like truly love more,
Mm-hmm.
where I can, instead of holding on to what any expectations or things that I would prefer as outcomes, it's like, okay, I can release my grip a bit and say, I trust you. I trust you with what you're going through or what you're experiencing. I trust me with what I'm feeling and experiencing. Um, this is maybe it's like this is really hard. And I can only at every step do what feels most true, and whatever timeline things unfold, however this conversation like needs to happen, like there's not much I can do to control that. But
Mm-hmm.
there's certain ways that you can show up. Like we can show up with more honesty. I can show up with more transparency. I can show up with more accountability. I can show up with um, really like owning my part. Or I can show up with recognizing, oh shit, like I did something I didn't realize I did. Like, um,
Which
that's
is
like,
so ironic because, like, when they have these, like, there's this so many conversations about like no self
yeah.
that often sounds like a sort of license to do whatever the fuck you want, regardless the circumstances, because there's nobody doing it, right? And like, there's an element of conversations about that, which like seem to imply that there's like no accountability and no responsibility. And I think we both share this with Sarah that like in my experience, it's been literally the opposite because you kind of acknowledge and see so many like patterns and coping mechanisms and things like that. It's like you just recognize that this is what you do. So you just take complete and utter responsibility for that. It doesn't make sense not to like do you know what I mean? So it's like literally the opposite of denial because it goes back to that defendedness that before, for me at least, there would be a lot of pride. I would have trouble actually admitting that I messed up or that something was actually my fault or that I contributed to the situation getting messy. I would actually have big trouble doing that because that had to do with my self-image and my pride and everything that I was afraid to lose or whatever. But now that there is no fear of losing any of this, there is only accountability left, you know? So yeah, I hope it like ties up to what you were saying. I'm sorry, I think I actually interrupted you again. Sorry.
No,
Um,
not at all. Oh, that's yeah, I love the accountability. Actually, now when I see folks being funny, my lighting's like
it's great. It actually is great. It
I
looks lovely. Yeah.
um the sun is moving in the sky. But yeah, it's funny because when I see folks being really accountable now in the world, I just don't see any difference almost to like these shifts and that. Like if you're just like really accountable and honest,
Mm,
that's what this is, right? It's like you're just so close to what's true and you're so willing to be humbled. I
mm-hmm.
think that's like you're so willing to be humiliated, humbled, like really brought to your knees by life and say like, okay, this is what's really here. And and sometimes those things that are really here are actually really beautiful things. You know, actually like and even just being more accountable, being more honest makes things more beautiful. Actually, it feels like it makes everything feel more whole, more beautiful, more connected.
Yeah, because I think there's something else, you know, if you've ever been in a situation where someone just was like really honest and came clean. If you've ever done that or been witnessing someone doing that, you know that moment when you're like you've got nothing to lose, so you just come as you are. You just come clean. Okay? I actually have chills just going through my body, just feeling that because everybody benefits from that. Because this is touching something universal, right? Like it's about that transparency. Because shame and guilt only lurk in stuff that's hidden, you know? So it's almost by someone kind of opening up and being vulnerable that way and sort of undefended in coming clean, it almost gives quote unquote like the permission for someone else to do that and maybe drop that burden of having to uphold a certain image or having to pretend or having to whatever. And it's almost like, oh, like we want to breathe like a sigh of relief, like for that person because we can like connect to that, what it feels like to have this burden of having to uphold, like I said, a certain image or live up to something, you know? Or just hide anything and then live with this shame. And that's like all the shadowy stuff that then, you know, starts playing out if unaddressed. So I think that there's something that when something is so universal, everybody benefits. Like this really is about everybody then, you know, just witnessing um these sort of situations. So yeah, I lost the plot now, but I think I got the gist of where I was going with this. Go ahead, Sarah. I think you have something to add.
Yeah. No, and that kind of spins off. The last question we left on in our last conversation was instead of trying to clean ourselves of things, you know, of karma, of the things that we deem like unclean,
Mm-hmm.
we instead meet whatever's here, which is like a non-judgmental way of just saying like, can I just show up? Yeah, and just see the thing,
Yeah.
you know, without judging myself, without making myself bad, which is the shame.
Mm-hmm.
We're all doing stuff all the time to each other and ourselves that we're not maybe proud of, things that we do by mistake or just out of patterns and things that like that is a universal human experience. So like to what you're saying, to just be able to meet those things. And it's not easy because we have a lot of conditioning around making things bad. And that's kind of like a huge thing around all of this is like, can we not split things in two, into good and bad?
Mm-hmm.
Can we
Mm-hmm.
just can we just lean into it as just what it is, just as
Yeah.
this thing? And in doing that, there is like a liberation that happens for if it's a conversation between two people, there's a liberation that happens for both people. Yeah, like you said, when one person takes accountability and says, I did this thing and I own it. I fully own
Mhm.
it. And I like, these are all the things that are in that for me. And be able to just like be fully exposed and vulnerable and intimate in that revealing of those things. And you're right, so right. It's like it allows the other person to not only be like to see themselves in that, but to be undefended as well,
Yep.
be unprotected as well. Because when you see someone else being so vulnerable and owning something so much, it makes you feel safe.
Hmm.
So even if the thing that was done was something that was harmful, like that sense of safety can be built through the vulnerability of releasing the defenses and through the
Yep.
full ownership of saying like I know like how I did this, what I did, and I can see how I won't do it again um, by my own awareness, bringing the awareness to that thing. Because we usually only like perpetuate harm unconsciously, assuming
Yeah.
we're not doing it intentionally.
Yes, yes.
Because we're not bringing our awareness to those things. We're not seeing them. We're not confronting them. We're not bringing them into our vision head on. And it's like bringing it into our vision head on and like really leaning into that truth. Then it becomes that thing loses its power in terms of like its ability to unconsciously like play out in our life.
Yep.
Which is so beautiful, to just like it seems like so much more to me, like I just see the power in that of just like the full sitting in that honesty, the full sitting in that accountability, that vulnerability is so much more powerful than pretending that you're perfect or
Big
pretend
time.
that you've got it
Yep.
together. Yeah.
Yep. And that ties up to number three, which is I'm grateful and thankful for the fact that this journey got me to my knees. Like it was really painful and uncomfortable, but I'm absolutely grateful that it exposed so many hidden sort of aspects of myself that were not pleasant or nice to see about myself, including certain like narcissistic tendencies or like manipulative behaviors that really on the surface looked nothing like that. Okay. Nothing like that. Like, say, what looked to me like care was actually a pattern of control, for example, so I'm not talking about like really out there sort of things. It's I'm talking about the very subtle ways in which I operated that I really didn't see, that was just dishonest, for example. And to see that was crushing to the so-called ego, but it was equally something that I'm so grateful that it was brought to the light. And this seeing this sort of threw me off my high horse once and for all, because I was on a high horse a lot. And that was something that I had to see also, that I was, on the one hand, sort of tolerant and open and this like, free spirit, but also incredibly judgmental, like feeling morally superior, better than self-righteous many times without being aware of that. And so that painful process threw me off my high horse and made me way more understanding of other people and way more like, I really get you. And like, I see why you're acting this way. I can see why you would do this. Yet at the same time, and that might sound like a contradiction, it made my boundaries even more clear in that I get you and I don't have to tolerate this behavior. So it kind of made it easier, but those boundaries are not put or said from a place of this moral superiority or this being on a high horse. It's simply pragmatism. It's clean. It's like, mate, I get you. I don't judge you, and I'm not okay with this. So I'm out. And but it's clean. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know if you want to talk to that. So it's both. It's being thrown off the high horse, but also being more kind of assertive, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and what this brings up for me is actually because when you come into a new relationship, especially with emotions, where you're like, okay, I'm going to meet this anger, I'm going to meet my sadness, I'm going to meet my grief. Then those emotions, um, they are allowed to be what they are. They are allowed to arise as they do, and there's less and less like of that resistance, right, to actually.
Mm-hmm.
And as there's less and less resistance in my experience, then emotions feel more like aliveness. This
Yeah.
like pure like aliveness of like a big anger rises up and then it's just felt as almost like a pleasurable like aliveness, right? Because it's just energy. It's like a movement of energy. And so there's this like the what you're saying, like the cleanness almost of like the burning of any fuel
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, like whatever is being experienced. So, like even, yeah, if I feel like this anger coming up, and it does, it's like, okay, and then like it's pretty clear where my boundary needs to be in this situation. There's like a cleanness in a sense to the feeling of like it's not sticking to a place where I'm like really resenting that person or this, I've got like this thing that's gonna like keep going on a loop of a thing as much as there's like, okay, this happened and this is what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a really it's to be able to just like let life be kind of like lived
Mm-hmm.
through your body and like the intelligence of your body to tell you what action needs to be taken and then take the action from a place that's not you know using those emotions against them, but
Yeah.
taking the information of those emotions and making decisions, like, really um, doing what's wise in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like, setting a boundary, like you said, can be as simple as like, yeah, I know how I feel about that. I know how I feel about that because I'm not resisting my feelings as much about that.
Yeah.
And I can feel my body's intelligence about that because I'm sitting with my body with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the boundary feels pretty clear where it needs to be. And I think that's where a lot of, for me, like my boundaries didn't feel as clear before because I wasn't listening as much to my body. I wasn't allowing my emotions to really arise as much. And I'm still on a journey of being able to like feel all that I'm feeling
Girl,
and
tell
to
me about it.
feel yeah. And there's always new messages. There's always new things that like we're being communicated from. And I think that's so cool about our bodies. Like there's just so much there. Um, but being able to have more access to that is just such a
Yeah.
gift. Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. Another segue. Number four, that what I'm grateful for is that ironically, because like normally we think about, liberation or awakening or whatever as like transcending the human experience. And there's no denying that there's an element of that is hugely important. So I'm absolutely not denying that. But ultimately, like as a result of that, ironically, the journey got me back in touch with my body and actually made me realize how disconnected I was from my body without even knowing it. So genuinely way more feeling in the body, which to me is still a very new uh, experience, and it's an ongoing exploration of hearing what my body says and seeing how it feels. And a lot of it is really uncomfortable. I'm not joking. Like there's sensations that certain situations that come up, and there's gonna be like a like definite some kind of discomfort of some sort, in the body. Um, but it's not being numb anymore. It's not being intellectualized. It's not being spiritualized away. It's met in that body. And so I think definitely this is on number 4 on the list of things that I'm thankful for, of being back in touch with my body, and also the fact that I see very clearly now how this is, I don't see, this is a journey without end. For as long as I'm human in this body, it's like knowing that it can surprise me multiple times. So this whole assumption of, or looking to be free of sensations, free of patterns, is something that I'm free of. This is what I'm grateful of. It's like, life humbled me enough times to not assume that I'm ever free from this sort of stuff. And actually from desire to like have this ideal or this goal to be, also somewhere that I'm trying to reach that isn't there either. So everything is explored here now and fresh, as I go. So we literally, Sarah and I were laughing that basically literally everything we talked about in our conversations is quite literally everything we're living through. There's nothing, everything we talk about is from the actual experience, and not from, we read about it in a magazine about non-duality or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not read about it in a magazine. Yeah, but I think
Hmm.
that's the thing about what feels so, for me, it just feels, it's hard to even describe, but just being able to live in a way where you feel like, yeah, you're just living life, period. Living life in such a way that you're not trying to put anything between you and life anymore. Where it just like, and that's where it feels like, okay, like here we are.
Yep.
We're recording this thing and just talk about the things that we're actually living and knowing and feeling.
Yep.
Um, and there, yeah, I like you, like having spent a lot of my life trying to be on a pedestal without even knowing it, like trying to be, you know, be the best at something, or to achieve a lot, or to be seen as something great, um, to be perfect. There's such liberation for me in that story of coming to a place of like being humbled again and again and again. And to be in a place where yeah, like all it feels really true and good is to just be as truthful and real as I can. And when you're coming from that place too, there's not much to be afraid of, because what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yep.
Like something comes up, someone, like what the worst thing for an ego is like someone accusing you of doing something, or you falling from grace. Well, if you don't see yourself as something better, then if you don't see yourself as somewhere up there, you can't fall from there. Like yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like if I just see like, yeah, I've fucked up, like
Yep.
I've manipulated, I've lied, I've done things. I can understand other people who've done those things too. And I understand how those things are unconscious. I understand like why we do these things. We can have compassion for why we do these things. There's nothing probably someone has done
Totally.
or like felt that I haven't felt. And
Yeah.
as they're like just coming into to meeting those things and knowing that they're there. They've always been there, but like actually just like seeing them, then it's like, okay, yeah. And it's okay because like we're human and it's okay. Like we do make mistakes. We do things and we have this beautiful opportunity to like to be with that thing
Yeah.
and to actually just um we can call it like love or whatever, but to
Yeah.
just to say this this doesn't make me less of anything. Actually, like this could expand or make me more, like make me actually more human in a sense. Like make this space, that big space
Yes. Yes.
that can
Yes. Yes.
hold all these arising
All
things.
the facets of the humanness. Yeah.
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 That even by experiencing the worst things in our lives or doing the worst things we've ever done, can be this opportunity to be bigger, to like to feel like you're in a sense like you have more that you can hold across the whole spectrum of what it
Yeah.
means to be human and to be a spiritual being. Like that there's this breadth and depth that when we're like able to hold all of those things, um, it's almost like there's such a depth and breadth to that groundedness of like, like a really rooted tree. It's like got the roots are going like all the way out and all the way down into the darkness of all the things that are, usually unseen or
Mm.
under some kind of mask. Um, but to really feel into those things and dig into those things and like be with those things, there's so much power and strength in that. Um, yeah, that would not
But
have.
it's also funny because do you see how it's kind of interesting how I see like a emotion where the more you actually meet your humanness fully, no matter how uncomfortable or ugly, quote unquote, or what whatever, the more actually you touch your, let's call it a true nature because I don't have a better word now, but like you actually touch the transcendent through that. And the more you touch the transcendent, the more you're able to touch your humanness and be with that. So it's kind of like this really incredible dance, that speaks to that no separation that to me is just like so beautiful about that and how genuinely our humanness when fully met can be absolutely a portal to that transcendence and not getting sort of out of our humanness to some other place where there is no humanness anymore, which also speaks to me. Just want to say the attempts to like kill the ego or get rid of an ego, I think they often sort of come with this ideal again of you becoming this perfect person free of things that we may carry. And to me, being egoless is actually the willingness to meet those parts that you're wanting to get, that you want to get rid of or fix, or that you bash, shame, guilt, and stuff like that. So I just wanted to add that. And I think the fifth and final, at least for me, Lucio Sarah, is I'm really, truly, and utterly grateful. And I'm just going to try to get emotional here again. Um, is that I had a chance to come in contact, whether it was through book, video, conversation, or whatever, with teachers who told me about everything that we've just talked about. The teachers who never pretended to be perfect, that never pretended that they are free of aspects of the humanness, that were really open about it if anything, or at least didn't try to project. And maybe I'm not even saying, even if they didn't like openly talk about the like details, what I'm trying to say that they were not projecting an idea, okay, about themselves, that they are somehow free of this stuff. So that's why, it's so shocking when something comes up about a teacher that it's a look up to who knowingly or not projects this sort of image. And then it's such a shock precisely because there's this ideal that we create, that they create, And so I really can't underline how grateful I am that I happened to stumble upon teachers who really kind of annihilated this idea for me very quickly, um, which also was kind of both humbling and humiliating in some instances, so that I would not have that ideal for me as a goal. And they were the people who helped me meet my humanness for the first time and gave me an initial idea of what that looks like and feels like. And that's how my awakening actually really then kicked off because of that, because I started meeting my humanness, ironically, not trying to gloss it, fix it, or escape it, or change it. And I will be for the rest of my life grateful that there were only a few, but there were enough to have an incredible impact, and I will be forever grateful for that, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. It's such a relief.
Mm.
Such a relief when you've been a spiritual seeker and you've been working so hard. And
Yeah.
you're like, I just want this thing, whatever this thing is. I'm just like,
Mm.
to do this thing. I know for me, I just felt such a strong devotion. Like, I will do anything. I just feel
Mm-hmm.
so calling to do this thing, whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
But the relief that this thing is this. This thing is not something I need to seek anymore.
Mm.
But I mean, there are things that we can still do, practice as things, but that, yeah, this is in that very human moment when you're crying with
Yeah.
all of the things from that day. It's not on your meditation cushion, sitting up straight, needing to look a certain way and feel a certain way. It's actually like in this very moment with the very real human thing that's going through your life. Can I
Yeah.
be with this thing? Can I sit with this thing? That I feel like, yeah, is such a beautiful relief to not need to clean things up, to change my life completely, to look
Mm-hmm.
a different way, but almost the opposite. Allow my life to be what it is, and then see this within everything in my life. Like you said, there's such a beauty in that portal or the doorway into like every hard thing coming up being a doorway
Yeah.
into the unconditioned, into compassion, into greater depth of understanding, into just, yeah. And it is interesting how like coming into the unconditioned then allows you to be with your humanity in a more compassionate way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, here we are.
Here we are. And the journey continues. And we keep you updated, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Like you've
You,
been you're you're
you,
you're on the journey with us, so that's great. And thank you for listening to our conversations, and thank you for watching, and thank you for commenting and supporting the channel as well. And yeah, we'll see what the next week brings. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Hi, thanks everybody.